Now I have the honor of introducing to you Dr. Manil Suri. Dr. Suri was born and raised in Mumbai, came to the United States in 1979 to attend graduate school at Carnegie Mellon University, completing his PhD there in 1983. That same year, he came to UMBC as an assistant professor in the Department of Mathematics and Statistics. And as he very modestly writes on his academic website, "This is the only job I've ever had." He is, of course, now a full professor, has taught abroad in Switzerland, France, Finland, and the United Kingdom. Dr. Suri was recently awarded a very prestigious Elkins Professorship by the University System of Maryland. These awards are given to a select number of professors who excel in demonstrating exemplary ability to inspire students and who are engaged in scholarly outreach beyond the Maryland educational system. Dr. Suri will be using his award to foster interest in mathematics among kindergarten to 12th grade students and the general public. Some of you may have been lucky enough to have seen his DVD that Dr. Obrowski referred to, entitled Taming Infinity for Non-Mathematicians. And as a non-mathematician myself, I can only attest to his remarkable ability to communicate. We are here today not to talk about math, however, but to celebrate the debut of Dr. Suri's second novel, The Age of Shiva. After winning the 2002 Barnes & Noble Discover Prize and being a finalist for the PEN/Faulkner Award for his The Death of Vishnu, Dr. Suri is bringing us another novel, drawing on Hindu mythology and the complex world of South Asian history. His main character is a young woman, as she not only comes of age rather abruptly herself, but also must come to terms with life in early post-independence India. There's obviously a metaphor here, but I don't want to give too much away, even from the first 80 pages I have so enjoyed. I must say, as someone who works and teaches in the field of gender studies, he does a remarkable job of finding that female voice and exploring gender identity and gender relations. As a historian of 20th century Europe and post-colonialism, I also have to say he does a wonderful job of grappling with the complexity of national independence, ethnic and religious strife, and colonial legacies. This is the second novel in what he plans as a trilogy, so I can't wait to savor the rest of this novel and then wait for the next. With no further ado then, please join me in welcoming Dr. Manil Suri.
Thank you. It's really wonderful to be here. Can people hear me in the back? No. No? Okay. That's what I was warned, that I should probably speak into the mic. Is that any better?
Yes.
Okay. So I need to speak into the mic. Oops. They did warn not to turn it up. No matter what you do, don't turn it up. That's what I was told.
Thank you so much.
They said, you know, watch Freeman. He might try to turn it off, but don't let that.
Watch, you just
Well, it's really a pleasure being here. And again, am I okay? If I stand like that, can you hear? No. Okay. Let me just get closer, really close to the mic. I should croon. So well, is that better? Okay. Okay, now I have to kind of maneuver it. So let me actually first get my water. Oh, I have a bottle here. I must warn you, I've been to India for 3 weeks, and I kind of lost my voice at alternate readings. So I don't know if this is one of the readings where I will lose my voice, or if it's one that I won't. But I'm sure Freeman will take over if I do.
Turn up the mic.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's the amazing thing. Upstairs, you were giving a toast, and you were just blaring away without a mic. And I said, my God, what if I have to say something after this? But luckily I didn't. So. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and read you a piece, which is right from the beginning of the book, and then talk a little bit more about it, and do a little bit more reading I'm actually trying to see what things.
Let me try to stop the humming. Just 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute. Now see if you can try it. Try it.
Okay, is it still humming or? Okay, okay, that's better. Every time I touch you, every time I kiss you, every time I offer you my body, Ashwin, do you know how tightly you shut your eyes as with your lips you search my skin? Do you know how you thrust your feet towards me, how you reach out your arms, how the sides of your chest strain against my palms? Are you aware of your fingers brushing against my breast, their tips trying to curl around something to hold on to, but slipping instead against my smooth flesh? Ashwin, do you notice the wetness emerge from my nipples and spill down the slopes of my chest? Is that your tongue that I feel? Are you able to steal a taste or two? Ashwin, your eyes still closed, drops of moisture dappling your nose. Do you know how innocent you look, how helpless, as I guide the nipple towards your mouth? For an instant I feel like teasing you, drawing my nipple across your lips, but only for a touch, and swinging it away. Watching your tongue dart out in confusion, the fingers still opening and closing and curling, worry beginning to crinkle your face. And that helplessness, that exquisite helplessness in your expression, that need for my body, for the nipple that is yours, for the breast I have so cruelly taken away. Yes, love can be capricious, can it not, my sweet? But of course, I relent before I even begin. Your look suffuses me with guilt. I let your mouth close around me. I feel the pressure of your gums, your lips. The power in your jaws surprises me. A little more strength, and I can see there will be pain. Your tongue pulls against my nipple. So practiced, so persuasive, so determined. How does it know what to do? I feel myself responding. Each tug brings liquid flooding up, engorging my breast, pushing out into your insistent mouth. Your feet twist and turn against my belly as you feed. Your hands finally find purchase on my breast. Fingers splaying out around tiny palms, your orb, your world held in your hands. I lose myself in the rhythm of your intake. Am I imagining it, or is there a parallel rhythm that echoes inside me? A longing that rises through my body and trembles under my skin. I feel myself flush. I feel the color spread through my chest. Then I see your face, your forehead losing its worry, your eyelids no longer wrinkled tight. I watch the smile trying to train the corners of your mouth, and the heat inside me turns into warmth. There is nothing, I think to myself, as you let go of my nipple and turn to me filled, nothing that can be as satisfying as this. Afterwards, I lie next to you. You fit so well into my body. Before closing my eyes, I take one last look. Your eyes, your ears, your hands, your feet, all these I check to make sure they're still there, still intact. Even the tiny curl of your manhood, nestling so innocently between the fleshy fold of your thighs. All this I have created. All this has come from me. As I drift off to sleep, I wonder if you will ever know these thoughts that flow through my mind. These soliloquies I address to you, this conversation I keep up in my brain. Perhaps one day I will tell you about the yearning from which you were born, the lives with which you can play, the planets over which you hold sway. Ashwin, the sign in the sky. Ashwin, the constellation of twins. Ashwin, the one who went before you, the one with whom you share your name. You are the hope and the fire, the absolution, the purifier. You will deliver me, will you not, from this life I find myself in? So that's the central character. Her name is Meera, and as you can see, she's talking to her son, and the whole book is basically in the second person where she's talking to her son. This part is actually set in around 1965 when the son has just been born. And what happens after that is there's a sort of flashback to 1955 1955 was an interesting period. It was India 8 years after independence. India got independence in 1947. The reason I know that very well is because my parents got married in 1947. They got married on July 10th, 1947. And the country split apart on August 15th, 1947. Now, they happen to be in Rawalpindi, which has been in the news, unfortunately, for not so nice reasons recently. But that was the area that actually went to Pakistan. So they had to leave right away. And their big story was that they didn't even open their wedding presents and just had to flee because they were Hindu and that was going to be the Muslim area. And so that story has always been in my mind, just the whole idea of partition and what it has done to these people. So when I started writing this book, one option was to just go ahead and write their story, but that's never very interesting. Somehow reality is never so interesting. So the mathematician or the writer or whatever it is, you start twisting things around. What if, what if? And that's what gave rise to this book. And so I thought, what if these people, or what if my people, my hero and heroine, they met in 1955 when the country, the new country, had 8 years to sort of become somewhat more developed, evolve somewhat. It was a very interesting time in Indian history. It was still a very male-dominated time, but the first stirrings of modern thought and even feminism were just starting to appear. And so that's what you see throughout this story, the old versus the new. So let me just go ahead and read you another part, another small bit, just to give you an idea of the story. So what happens is Meera, through a complicated set of events, finds herself in a marriage that she's really not so sure she wants to be in. And this is the first night that she's in, she's just reached the house that her husband lives in. There's a problem with the husband's name. His name is D-E-V, and unfortunately that's pronounced Dev. And now when people hear that, they say, Dave? You have Dave in India? Why did you name him Dave? So when you're reading it, of course, it's clear, but I'm saying Dave, and it's different from Dave. I know it sounds the same, but it's different. Trust me. So Hema is Dev's sister, so Meera's sister-in-law, and Arya is Dev's brother, and Sandhya is Arya's wife. But you don't really need to remember all that. So I'll just read you a bit. The electricity was out on Dev Street. It's gone for the night, Hema announced cheerfully. We are one of the first ones they cut when the city runs out of power. She held a lit match under a candle to soften its base, then stuck it upright on the arm of a chair. We are just a government colony after all, not like the wealthy area where your father has his house. I sat perched on a charpoy in the only bedroom in the flat, the long gungat of my sari draped over my face like a veil. It was difficult to maintain the pose Dev's mother had taught me. The sagging of the charpoy ropes kept threatening to topple me. But the position felt as centering as a yoga asana. By concentrating on keeping steady on the bed, I was able to take my mind off the despair closing in on me. You can speak now, Even take your gungat off. All the guests have gone. Though you'll have to show your face sooner or later, all those people who've been saying it's your sister who's the prettier one. Hema held up a candle near my head, filling the inside of my gungat with light and trying to peer through. Besides, you must be dying under there, not being used to having the fans all off. Tell me, is it true Dev Bhaiya said you had an air conditioner at your house? We had two, one in the drawing room and one in Paji's library, but I remained silent. Well, you at least had lots of servants, didn't you? Dev Bhaiya said your father made a lot of money as a publisher. Not that we don't have servants, mind you. Well, maybe not a servant exactly, but we do have a Ganga. She comes in to clean the pots. No cook, though. Don't worry, we won't make you work. Not while you're a new bahu anyway. When Sandhya Didi was a new bahu, just married to Arya Bhaiya, she didn't have to step into our kitchen even once for the first month. Now Mataji makes her do all the cooking, of course. Though between you and me, her rice clumps so much, the Ganga could do it better. I suppose we shouldn't expect you to be good either, being a rich man's girl and everything. I've already told my parents, when I get married, it's going to be to the wealthiest man they can find. Marry for comfort, that's what I want, not for love like you. Hema, my mother-in-law, called. Stop that Dehradun Express tongue of yours and come right out. Coming, Mataji. Anyway, we'll talk more tomorrow. Tonight this room is yours. Arya Bhaiya and Sandhya Didi are sleeping with us in the other room, even though he's the elder brother. It's going to be tight. Plus all that rich wedding food must have given Didi gas again. And on top of that, she snores. Hema fluffed up a pillow and laid it at my feet. You have such pretty toes. But I guess that's what new brides are supposed to have, at least in the beginning. I'm sure my Bhaiya will be very impressed. She skipped to the door. Enjoy this special night of yours. So it takes a while for Meera to really try and establish herself in this household. And little by little, she wins a lot of the people over. And she kind of reconciles herself to living in this new changed circumstance where she's left her rich father's house and gone to live with these people. There's one person who is harder to really win over, and that's Sandhya. Sandhya is the wife of Arya, so that's her sister-in-law. And what I'm going to describe is something that's very South Asian. Are there any people from India here? Who's from India? Okay. This is something, that even now when you look at TV serials in India and so on, you see a lot of this. There's a lot of respect shown to elders. So the traditional way is to touch someone's feet and show that you respect them in that way. Of course, it's also carried out in other contexts. And anyway, and it's something that, and let me just read it. And if you're South Asian, you'll get a special kick out of this probably because you've probably been in this position yourself. Each morning after her bath, I would see Sandhya in the courtyard performing her puja of Arya. She would swirl an earthenware lamp resting on a round metal thali in a circle before Arya's face, as one might in front of a picture at a shrine. She would mark his forehead with ash from the platter, and sometimes dab on some vermilion and a moistened grain of rice. She would bend her head and wait for him to color the parting in her hair with a line of the vermilion. Then she would bend even lower to touch his feet, first the right, then the left. She would run the same hand over her head to bless herself as she began to rise. The first time I saw this puja, I stood in the kitchen transfixed. The touching of feet was a ritual strictly forbidden by our father in our house. All this scraping, all this servility, hasn't anyone in this country heard of human dignity? Aren't there enough gods in the temples already to satisfy this national hunger for groveling? We spent 2 centuries licking the boots of the British. Did you ever see them go around prostrating themselves at anyone's feet? Our cousins, of course, had all been taught to perform this ritual at the beginning and end of every visit to show respect to their elders. Paji would yank their heads back up the instant they started to bend. Did you drop something? He would demand. Are you preparing to do push-ups? You can look around on the floor all you want, but I'll slap you if you touch my feet. For a while, when we were young, Biji, our mother, tried to force us to go through the ritual when Paji was not around. You insolent daughter of an owl, I don't care what your father says. I'll break every bone in your body if you don't touch your grandmother's feet. At other times, she would try to cajole us. It's a mark of respect, nothing else. What's the harm in bowing before wisdom, before age? She would tell us stories from the Mahabharata and the Ramayana to further her argument, such as the one where Bharat kept his brother's sandals on the throne when Ram was exiled into the forest. It's part of our culture, something that's come down to us from the ages, she would say. It's a dignified custom. You should perform it proudly, not be ashamed. Once Paji found out, he quickly put an end to Biji's efforts. What can one expect? The children in our village had to wash their parents' feet and drink the water afterwards in respect. Is that what she's going to teach you to do next? During the first years, Paji told us, there was a time when Biji wouldn't eat anything in the morning until she had touched his feet. She would tell me I was her lord, her protector, her provider, and she couldn't start the day without my blessing. When I stopped her, she would pull my shoes out from under the bed and perform her ceremony over them. When I hid those, she started waiting until I was in the bath to touch my house slippers instead. It was years before I could break her of the habit, before I could keep footwear lying around unlocked again. There's a pair that goes, there's a companion piece to this, and maybe I'll read it if there's time. So let's kind of stop right there in terms of the reading, and if there's time, I'll read you because this sets it up for something that propels a lot of the rest of the story, what happens later. So, with that question in your mind, I'm going to just stop and see, maybe start answering questions and just talk a little. So
let me ask you first. I had the privilege of reading a copy of the book some time ago, just recent weeks, and I kept thinking about the fact that you, as you were working with your editors, got responses from different editors in different countries. People had different perspectives. And now you're going around the world, from India to America to the UK, and we bring to the reading our own assumptions and biases. Could you talk about the reaction of people in India to the book itself, and if you expect to see a different reaction in this country to different parts, to the questions about the voice of Europe? Absolutely. First of all, I should give you a little story about Freeman and the book, because as he said, he's been really, we've been talking all these years and so on, and one day, I was telling him, we were talking about something else, and Freeman said, well, I've always wondered about those joint households, because that's a very common thing in India. There's a father and a mother, and all their children, they get married, and everyone comes and stays in the same family. And how does that happen if it's a really small house, if there's just one room? How do these people, newlyweds, how do they consummate their wedding? And I didn't really know. I didn't know the answer. And so I said, well, that's a good question to answer. And so if you read the book, you'll see the answer. So I have to count Freeman as one of my editors, or inspirations. But coming to your question, it's a very interesting question. People ask me this all the time. When you wrote the book, which audience did you have in mind? And for the first book, I was very fortunate that you don't have an audience. You're writing in secret, and you don't know if anyone will ever read this, and so you're completely free of that. For this book, I've been trying to shut out the audience because I have all the people, looking at me and saying how funny the first book was, and how they want the same characters, and they want the same kind of humor, and they want, and I'm trying to write something completely different. So it's always trying to shut out the audience. But having come back from India, I really think that the book has certain cultural references that I think would be best understood by an Indian audience. Interestingly enough, people in the UK also seem to get a lot of it. I guess they're exposed to Indian films and so on. People in the US probably are the furthest away culturally. And so that was a real issue. So, in terms of different editors, when my UK editor read this book, she thought it was perfect. This was my first draft, or my second or third draft, whichever one was
submitted to her. She thought, okay, this is great. You know, my agent also read it. She also thought it was great. My agent is actually from Lebanon, and she's lived in the UK for many years. So, you know, she's also one of the foreigners. So they both thought it was great. And then my US editor read it. And I was thinking, okay, she'll, you know, cross a few T's and dot a few I's, and that'll be it. It'll take a day or two, like it had for the first book. That's how the editing went for the first book. But no. It took about 8 or 9 months. And it was a long list that no, I didn't even get a list. I got all these ominous emails. You know, I'm reading your book, but, you know, and then something. And, you know, this section, well, we'll have to talk about this, and something. And then this just kept coming, and then finally this long list of things came, and it was a very difficult editing process. The problem was precisely what you just said. How do you bring these characters? How do you explain all their cultural problems and all their references to an audience that might not be familiar with them? And the problem that was happening was very simple to explain. People were sympathizing more with one character than the other, and I wanted it to be the other way around. So it was really very painstaking work trying to figure out what little things to change. And they were really minor changes, but hopefully they made a difference. How minor? Well, someone who had read the original draft just read the new one and kept asking me, well, what did you change? It's the same book. It's the same thing. And so it's very hard to see, but there has been a difference, I think. So it's that kind of fine-tuning that turned out to be quite time-consuming.
Other questions?
Yes.
I wanted to ask you about the sexual explicitness in the novel, because having traveled in India quite a bit, you know, open displays of affection are not really greeted welcomely. And so I wanted to ask one question about how the Indian readers respond to your novels. And secondly, what do you see the future of India in terms of, you know, we were there driving on superhighways, and there were religious cows walking on those highways, and nobody did anything about it. And you feel like India's held back by some of their religious and traditional beliefs in their progress to a modern democracy.
Okay, so first question was about sexual explicitness and how people in India would react to something like this. Yeah, I think what happens is that a very small subsection of people actually read books. So, you know, to kind of always fly under the radar. Like for instance, if this was something on TV, then there would be a hue and cry and everything. For example, last year, there was someone who won some big competition, something like, her name is Shilpa Shetty. And she became an actress. She was in some sort of reality TV show in England, and she won it. She went back to India, became an actress. Richard Gere came there and kissed her. And the whole country went wild. I mean, there were calls for hanging her and hanging Richard Gere, and, you know, all this stuff went on, and she had to publicly apologize and so on. I'm hoping to escape all that. I'm hoping. I've already told Richard Gere, don't kiss me. So, you know, one has to just play it by ear and see how these things work. In terms of your second question, there's a wonderful book called In Spite of the Gods. I don't know if you've heard of it. And that basically, you know, paraphrases the same question. Is the religious part holding India back? And it's a very complex question. On the one hand, you know, there is this strong force of religion in people's lives, and it can be a good force, it can be a bad force. People, for instance, let me kind of talk about a slightly different point. People talk a lot about India being such a diverse country, and you know, when the country was formed in 1947, for many years afterwards, even as late as the 70s, people were saying, well, this is just going to split apart. You know, India's going to fall apart. There's too many people, too many religions. It's going to end any time now. It can't be a democracy. interestingly enough, it really is the diversity that's making it a democracy. Because what happens is that if you look at a group of people who have a common interest, then they're all divided amongst themselves. They all belong to a different religion or a different community or a different caste. So in some sense, they can never quite agree on something, except that, you know, being a democracy is the only way that they can stand to live with each other. So surprisingly, diversity really fuels democracy there. And I think the kindest way to think about religion is in that context, that it's really making the population split apart in many ways, but that's actually not so bad in certain ways. And it keeps India a democracy. Yes?
Like Rebecca, I was very fascinated by your ability to write from the female perspective, capture emotional reactions and physical feelings. And I'm interested in what did you draw on to do that so convincing?
Well, the first thing I did, you know, I mean, you saw the first scene that I'd set myself to write. So I, you know, typed in breastfeeding on the web, and I looked up that. And there were several accounts of newly born children and their mothers and so on. And, you know, I got a lot out of it. And then I read all sorts of things, everything from classic feminist texts like Of Woman Born by Adrienne Rich, to, you know, just other things that dealt with feminism and with women and so on. And at some point, I realized that, okay, reading can only get you so far. You know, at some point, when I said, okay, it's time to write this, I had to really stop. I had to really feel. I had to really step into Meera and inhabit her body and imagine that, okay, what would it feel like to have a child at my own breast? And so you really have to kind of enter this character's mind and her body almost to be able to really see what the world looks like from their eyes. And that's what I really did. I was kind of drawing upon something. I'm not sure if you can ascribe it to people that I've met in my life, you know, the women that I've known, or just something that comes from each one of us. But it's really trying to step in and take tiny steps at first. And then as you get more comfortable in that, then try to see where this character will go, given the constraints that she has. It was a little scary because I wasn't showing it to anyone. I wasn't showing it to women. So I didn't know whether, you know, at the end someone would just, my editor would just say, eh, this is ridiculous. It doesn't work. So luckily that didn't happen. I think there was a question here.
Could you talk a little bit about your writing process? Like, how did you decide what characters were in there? Was there anybody who you drew out of the book, or do you get halfway in and decide to be other characters, or how do you decide who's in the book?
That's a great question, and
What was it?
the question was what my writing process is like. How did I decide which characters I wanted in the book? Did I throw away some characters? You know, how did that whole process go? Interestingly enough, this is not the book that I set out to write. I mean, it's completely different, I would say. Or maybe it's not completely different, but significantly different. When I finished the first book, The Death of Vishnu, I had one word to go by, Shiva, because that was the second in this trilogy. And so, and in fact, the working title was The Life of Shiva. And so what I thought was there would be a Shiva-like character. Shiva is an ascetic. He withdraws from the world. And he's very unattainable. That's what makes him erotic in a way. And so this central character would be someone that people would love but never be able to attain. And that was actually going to be the son, Ashwin. That was the central character. And I was going to write a book about him. And the first character that was going to love him but not really attain him was his mother. And so I started writing the book from, you know, I had that first section, and then I continued. Like this is in 1965, he's just been born, what happens then? And then I said, okay, let me write a couple of chapters just to give the backstory of this woman, and maybe introduce a little bit about the partition and so on. So I started reading about Indian history and writing a little bit, and I got more and more into it. Before I knew it, I'd written 200 pages. And Ashwin still hadn't been born. And so basically Meera just, you know, took the whole book out of my hands and said, hey, I'm going to be the heroine. And that's what characters do. And when characters do that, you better listen to them. So that's what I did. And I actually did write other sections of Ashwin, but then, compared to Meera, who was just such a strong character, they just didn't have a chance. So those just were edited out, and the book is what it is. And then it came together more and more, and just turned into this story from her perspective. Yes, way back there.
What's the relationship between mathematics and writing and narration?
What's the relationship between mathematics and writing? I think right now, for me, people ask me this question a lot, and I think I have about 33 answers to it. But the new one, I'm going to give you a new answer now. The new answer, and this struck me just on the way here, is people ask me something like, well, how much role did mathematics play in this? Or could you have written this if you weren't a mathematician? Something like that. And now I realize that I'm not qualified to answer that. I could only answer that question if there were two of me. And if we had been twins separated at birth, and one of us had been brought up to be a mathematician and one of us hadn't. And then you could compare, if we each wrote a book, how they would be different. But I've always been a mathematician for years and years, and so I can't answer that question. So that's the new answer.
Would you talk about the book in relationship to the trilogy itself, as you think about the Death of Vishnu, the Age of Shiva, the next book, and how these fit, and the rationale for the trilogy itself?
Yeah, and that, again, it's I'm going to be doing a lot of backtracking and flip-flopping about that. When I started this, I had this book, The Death of Vishnu, and right at the end, my agent asked me, well, what are you going to do next? We should tell the publishers when we send this book out whether you have some other projects planned. And I said, oh, well, there are two other gods, I told Nicole. I could write a book on each one of them. And before I knew it, she had told all the publishers, trilogy. And I tried denying it, but it was useless. So I was stuck writing a trilogy. The word trilogy already has a problem because most people think of a trilogy as the same characters. Yes. And this book does not have the same characters, and neither will the next book. So the new word is triptych. I'm writing a triptych. And someone suggested troika, so I might change it to that. But I'm writing something with the number 3, something like that. But given that it went that way, once I said, okay, once she told me there's no way to get out of this, you better think of something quick. Then I started thinking, okay, it makes sense. Vishnu is the god that's the preserver. He's the caretaker of the universe. He dies, and Shiva, who's supposed to be the destroyer, he's a destroyer because being an ascetic, he withdraws from the world, and without his participation, the world starts winding down. So in that sense, he's the destroyer. So Shiva will rise and end the world, and then Brahma, who's the creator, will come again and restart the cycle. So the third part would be the birth of Brahma. So that was the original idea. And as you saw already, I'm not very good at going after what I have in mind, like with the son and the mother and all that. So anyway, so now really there's still Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma in each one of these books, and each book really explains each deity's personality. The first book is very energetic, like Vishnu. It's full of energy. This book is more almost romantic, and it's full of longing, and that's what I associate with Shiva. And the next book, Brahma, is he's the creator. He's a very interesting god, though, because even though he's one of the 3 big deities, there's only 1 temple or 2 temples in the whole of India, and people don't really worship him. So that's a very interesting idea for a writer, being a god but not being worshipped. But that's going to be in the background. But really, the idea that I'm now looking at is the first book was about India. It was a snapshot. This building was a snapshot of India in the Death of Vishnu. So it was a snapshot of India in contemporary times, 80s, 90s. This book shows how India got to where it was, where it is. It kind of traces the evolution. And then the next book is really going to be about the future. So I'm going to try and construct some sort of future to India, what's going to happen. And that's of course, a challenge, because even before you write it, it can't possibly come true. So it's going to be interesting. Yes?
You know, just now when you mentioned the fact about maybe only 1 or 2 temples for Brahma, the creator, do you think it might have just anything to do with, I honestly just thought of it like a second ago, anything to do with the fact that generally in Indian society, creation is synonymous with woman giving birth to being the creator in India, and because women have generally been considered second-class citizens in Indian society, that's possibly why Brahma doesn't have a temple?
Or actually, actually it is what you said, but what I would change is that the third real piece of this trinity is the mother goddess, Devi. So people either worship Shiva or Vishnu or Devi. And there are 3 types of, you can roughly divide Hinduism into those 3 branches. So Brahma, in some sense, was a male creator and was there really for literary reasons. I mean, for every story, you need a creator. And that's why he's there. That's what was explained to me. And so for a while, I was thinking, OK, I might call it something with Devi in it. So I still haven't decided. Yes?
One thing that in your trilogy, your triptych,
Or Troika.
is the author. And I wondered how you came to establish your voice as a writer and whether you sensed it drifting as you've had more experience writing.
Well, not drifting, but actually pushing it to in a different direction. I think with the first book, The Death of Vishnu, it was very concise. I mean, I just looked at it and paired everything off that I could. And that was the mathematician in me. When you're writing a math paper, you're just trained to look over every sentence and every equation and just leave whatever is absolutely necessary. And that's my natural way of writing. With this book, I really thought, OK, I have to do something completely different. And there was a practical reason for that. An author writes a first book, it receives acclaim, and it's a success. Writes a second book, it's too close to the first, everyone nails him. And so that's the situation I wanted to stay away from. So I said, OK, let's write something completely different. Let's write something from a woman's point of view. Let's write something that's much more expansive, which is not my natural way of writing. So Vishnu was just set in one building. This goes from Rawalpindi to Delhi to Bombay. Vishnu was over the course of one day. This stretches over about 3 decades. Most of all, Vishnu had this conciseness, whereas here, I've consciously tried to see where I can take some of these stories, where I can extrapolate things. So I'm really, my endeavor has been to see what I can do as a writer.
Has your craft as a writer, you think, changed?
Well, I think I've discovered new areas that I can try to get some expertise in. You have to remember that I feel I'm now, this took 7 years, and part of the reason was also just getting to know the new craft. It's like switching from one subject in mathematics to another. You need to know the literature. You need to figure out how to do things. And so for this kind of book, which is very different, I needed to do something different. Yes?
You said you started out in Rawalpindi, where your parents lived. And are there any other parts of the book that reflect something that might have happened in your family's life?
There are, and that's because I'm a very lazy person, like all writers. If you're going to have some characters, well, why not? And you need to fill in the background, especially. Why not use things that you're familiar with? So, for example, my father was in the music business, and so I know all about recording studios and so on. And therefore, the Dev is someone who wants to be a singer. I could use all that knowledge. More often than not, I try to twist things around, though. I'll give you an example. In the book, well, in real life, my mother, being in that era where women had few choices, she wanted to be a doctor like her father. And she told her father, I want to go into medicine. Her father said no. He said that this is too difficult for a woman. And he didn't let her become a doctor. And this was a reason for great frustration in her life. And she went on and did two different masters in psychology and sociology. But this was always something that she told me. Well, in this book, what I've done is I've turned the tables. And so in this book, it's the father who wants to educate the daughter, but the daughter is resisting. And she says, no, I don't want to be educated. The reason she's doing that is because that's the only way she can assert her own identity. I mean, that's the only freedom available to her, to react. And so you see that in Mira's life a lot. But anyway, that's some of the way that you kind of take reality and then turn it around.
But Mira was good in science, as I recall.
No, that was a sister,
sister was
Sharmila.
good in
Yes,
science.
yes.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, there's a hand.
Now, I'm curious, your first book was a great success, probably beyond what you expected on the thing. How does it feel to go back now and have to face the public again after having done that?
Well, so far you've been very good. So. If it's always like this, then it won't be so bad. But it's something, I think I've had a nice long rest. 7 years is maybe a little too long. So it'll be interesting to be on the road again. India is always kind of the hardest in some sense, because you're always wondering if they're going to get you for being an author who lives abroad, Now he's writing about India, even though he's been living outside for so many years. So the book was very well received there. And that authenticity has been validated in some sense. So that's always one issue that has been resolved satisfactorily, at least for now. As far as people go, how they like it, I can't say. It's very hard to predict anything. So I know my publisher has been going crazy trying to decide which date to do it. They calculated that today was Super Tuesday, and so they've had this in the back of their minds for all this. So they kept shifting the date around, and I don't know what calculations they did, but it was released yesterday. So they somehow figured out when the reviews will come out. So we'll see.
Bloomsbury had something positive, very positive to say about it being a very significant book in recent decades out of India. What did the media in India themselves say? What did you hear?
There have been some really, really good reviews, excellent reviews. And Bloomsbury, for full information, is actually my publisher. So if they say it's one of the best books in the 20 years, don't yeah. They probably have a whole catalog of books that are the best in 20 years.
Got it.
Yes.
I want to compliment you on the beauty of your book, the physical book.
Thank
and
you.
Your end pages are beautiful.
Great, thank you.
I wondered how you got such a wonderful production.
Well, actually, the photograph I found it on the web. I knew what I wanted. I wanted a woman and her son, because it's about that. And I just found it. And it's actually by a French photographer. His name is Bouba or Boubat, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, who's unfortunately passed away. And so it was hell trying to get the permission for that. It took months to get permission, and the UK publisher gave up. They said, we're not going to do it. But the US publisher persisted, and so that's why we have that. And they do all these things now. If you look at the reissue of The Death of Vishnu, the first book, suddenly that's bright red now, because they want it to look more like this. So they do all these things. Thank you. Yes?
Do you read fiction, and if so, what?
Yeah, I do read fiction. I read quite a bit of fiction. I end up reading a lot of international fiction, lots of authors who are probably, just foreign authors, so to speak. Right now, the book that I'm reading, which is amazing, is called The Elephanta Suite by Paul Theroux. It's just an amazing book. I mean, it's got very little attention, but the middle novella is just incredible. And some of, I read all the Indian authors. I try to keep up with them. So that's certainly one thing. A book that I have been recommending to people, which, again, you might not even have heard of this, but this is a book called No God in Sight by Altaf Tyrewala. And it hasn't got much attention, but Salman Rushdie read it, and he was so amazed by it that he recommended the writer to his agent, and so his agent is now this writer's agent. So it's a great book. So put that on your list. No God in Sight, Altaf Tyrewala. Yes?
Mine is actually a quick, like a comment and
Sure.
a question for
Sure.
me. The quick comment is, okay, let me ask the question then. Do you think, and since you mentioned Rushdie right now, do you think that either the Ayatollah or most Iranians had really read Satanic verses? So my comment is, do you think your response to Sarah Myhoff's question about, the sexual explicitness in the book is something most Indians wouldn't read, and therefore you may be left alone scot-free, is really unwarranted, your self-confidence about it escaping?
Well, but the thing is that India is very interesting when it comes to sexual explicitness. I mean, that's one level of it. But another level is that a lot of things go there. And it really has to be, the public has to be hit over the head repeatedly by something before they will actually react. So I don't think there's really anything in this book that would offend people. I mean, certainly for this book, there's nothing, I don't think. On the other hand, if someone wants to make an issue out of a book, they can do it with anything. So Salman Rushdie's book, no one in Iran probably read it, but it's a big issue. So you can't really predict, and so for authors, it's a futile exercise to worry about, okay, I shouldn't write this because so-and-so will be offended. Someone will be offended. If not, then it's not a good book. Yeah?
So, Dr. Suri, way back when, before you wrote the first book, what made you say, I really think I have something here? You probably had other ideas of different books to write, maybe you didn't. But what made you say, this story could grow legs, could actually, be a good book?
Well, actually, I started that as a short story because I was writing a book already, which I had left unfinished after 5 chapters. So I said, okay, let me distract myself and write this quick short story about this man dying in India. And it'll just be a short thing, and I'll send it off somewhere and try to get it published. And then I knew what the end was going to be, but I wrote all this material, and I was nowhere close to the end. And so I went and took a writing workshop, and the instructor said, looks like you're writing a novel. And that's what really struck fear in my heart, because now I would have 2 unfinished novels. Okay, so maybe we should stop there, because I can feel my throat kind of going.
So please join me in thank you.
I said to Manil when we were upstairs, I said, I've never seen you this charming before. Usually a typical reflective mathematician like this, and he said, well, you've just seen the other side that's not really me. This is the real Manil, he's saying, charming, so we love it. This audience is an incredible array of friends of the university. I'm told that Senator and Mrs. Sarbanes are here somewhere. We're delighted to see you here, really are. And the Malhoffs, Neil and Sarah, and Sue Schlinger, friend of the library, and so many other people, and retired people, Bob Bashar and others. But let me say this. It is a delight to have all of you here tonight celebrating with us the life of the mind. And what a wonderful example. Would you give Manil one more hand?
And if you read the acknowledgments in my book, I think the last and the best is what I've saved at the end, and that is to the university. I really thank the university for incredible support over the last 7 years. It's hard to describe how much that has meant to have this job, to have this environment, to have the support. And so thank you to all of you. It's been amazing, and it's been very helpful. Thank you.